Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're your shortcut to getting truly informed.
Yep, we take your sources, pull out the core insights so you understand what matters without getting bogged down.
Exactly. And this is for you, our learner. You want to grasp things quickly, but deeply, right? See different perspectives, get those aha moments.
Well, you're in the right place. Today, we're doing a deep dive into Kate Swoboda's The Courage Habit.
Right. And this isn't just, another self-help book. Daniel H. Pink, author of Drive, he actually calls it helpful and cheerful for finding courage to change.
Yeah, and what's really interesting, I think, is how Swoboda mixes the science of change with this idea that facing your fear is actually the way to fearlessness, or at least more courage.
It flips the script a bit.
Totally. And for you, wanting those practical tools, the book promises tools based on research, ways to actually work with your fears.
Not just ignore them or push through.
Exactly. Work with them to connect to what you really want, your desires, and then build the skills needed for those maybe big visions you have.
Pamela Slim, who wrote Body of Work, she mentions the book helps us see fear as kind of essential for doing great work.
Yeah, a natural part of the process. And Rachel W. Call says it's a practical path out of being stuck in fear towards creating a life based on courage.
So the big idea seems to be courage isn't just something you're born with,
Right. It's a habit, a skill you can cultivate.
which probably hits home if you've ever felt stuck or like there's more out there for you. The book seems to speak directly to that feeling.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to really get under the hood of the courage habit, understand its core ideas, and figure out how you can apply them.
Okay, let's start where the book starts. This idea of your most courageous self. What's the essence of that?
Well, the core idea is really about identifying who that version of you is and then, trying to live in alignment with it.
Okay.
Swoboda shares this really relatable story in the foreword. She finished her master's, had all the student debt, and just felt terrified. No clear career path.
Even with the degree.
Right. Despite the achievement, she felt completely stuck, which highlights that feeling so many people have. You tick the boxes, but inside you're thinking, now what? External success doesn't always equal internal alignment.
That disconnect is so real. So from that experience, she developed some key questions to uncover this courageous self.
Exactly. She pushes you to ask things like, who am I really? What do I really want? What does a happy life look like for me? And how do I make who I am inside match how I live outside?
Those are big questions.
They are. They're meant to cut through the surface stuff and get to your core desires.
And there's an exercise to help with that, the liberated day thing. How does that
Yeah,
work?
the liberated day exercise. It's basically a visualization. You imagine a day with zero limitations, no money worries, no time constraints, none of the shoulds.
Like a total fantasy day.
Kind of, but the point isn't just the fantasy. It's about removing those barriers we think are there to see what you genuinely want, what drives you when you're not worried about being realistic.
Ah, okay. So it's about identifying the true desire, not the practical plan yet.
Precisely. Write it down without filtering for practicality first. Yeah. What truly excites you. That's the fuel for your courageous self.
Got it. Finding your true north. And she gives examples, right? Shay and Ellen, what do they show us?
They show how different courage looks for different people.
Yeah.
Shay, the yoga teacher, her courageous self was more vocal, more risk-taking in her business, more, out there.
Okay.
But Ellen, a sales rep, her courage was quieter, embracing minimalism, making big life changes to prioritize reading and quiet time.
So it's not one size fits all.
Absolutely not. The insight for you, listening, is that courage is about your authentic self, not some external definition of bravery. It's deeply personal.
Makes sense. And there's another tool to make this more concrete in our own lives, asking a specific question across different areas.
Yeah, that's a really practical one. Look at different parts of your life, work, money, family, health, whatever, and ask, what would be different here if my most courageous self was running the show? It forces you to think about specific actions, specific shifts. How would you actually behave differently? Brings it down to earth. There's a worksheet for it online too, apparently.
That sounds useful for getting specific. And it's not just about adding things, but also subtracting. The stop doing list.
Yes, the stop doing list is crucial. What are you doing that drains your energy or just doesn't serve that courageous self anymore?
So decluttering your life.
Exactly. It's not just about freeing up time, though that's part of it. It's about creating energetic space for the new, more aligned things to come in, letting go of the old patterns.
Okay, so we've got a vision of this courageous self. We know what we might need to stop doing. Then the book tackles the big blocker, fear. And it busts the myth of fearlessness right away.
Yeah, that's a key point. The book says, look, trying to be completely fearless, probably not going to happen. It's likely a losing battle.
So don't aim for zero fear.
Right. Instead, Swoboda says the value is in understanding your fear, acknowledging it, claiming it even, accepting it's part of being human, not something you pretend isn't there.
And to understand it, the book brings in some brain science about
It
habits.
touches on it, yeah. How our fear responses can get wired into our basal ganglia, the habit center of the brain. They become automatic.
Like muscle memory, but for fear.
Kind of. Understanding that helps you see these fear routines aren't necessarily conscious choices anymore, they're learned patterns. But the good news is, patterns can be changed. You can recognize the neurological basis.
Which brings us to these fear routines, the automatic ways we react when fear or self-doubt hits. These sound like the real traps.
They really are. So Boda identifies 4 common ones. And recognizing your main pattern, that's the first huge step to changing it, getting it out of the subconscious.
Okay, let's walk through them. First up, the perfectionist. What's the fear driving that one?
Underneath all that striving for flawlessness, there's often a deep fear of inadequacy, of not being good enough.
So they overcompensate.
Exactly. Driven to do it better, constant criticism, internal and external, overworking, feeling exhausted even if they look successful. Fun often feels undeserved. And inside, they might even be unsure what they truly want.
Oh, that sounds draining. Okay, next, the martyr. What's the fear there?
For the martyr, it's often a fear of not being loved or valued if they put their own needs first, like their worth is tied to their service.
So they sacrifice themselves.
Yeah, believing their own desires aren't possible because of obligations. They find it hard to receive help or support, confuse kindness with total self-sacrifice, and often end up depleted or resentful.
Making their own needs invisible. Okay, then the pessimist.
Core fear.
Fear of disappointment, I think, or failure. The pessimist just fundamentally believes things won't work out for them anyway.
So why bother trying?
Pretty much. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It justifies not taking action, avoiding responsibility. You might see sarcasm, insisting they can't do things, blaming circumstances.
It's a defense mechanism, in a way, protecting themselves. Lastly, the saboteur. What's driving that? Often it's a fear of commitment, fear of vulnerability, of really putting themselves out there and potentially failing or being judged.
So they pull back.
Yeah, they avoid committing, maybe self-handicap, like not trying their best so they have an excuse if things go wrong. Difficulty really applying themselves, even if they have potential. Staying safe by not fully engaging.
Seeing these patterns laid out is really insightful. And the book says, figure out which one feels most like you. That awareness is step one.
Absolutely. Just naming it, recognizing, oh, that's my go-to fear reaction, takes away some of its power, brings it into the light.
Okay, so we know our courageous self. We know our potential fear traps. Now, how do we build courage? The book gives us the 4 parts of the courage habit.
Right. These are the core habits to practice. Think of them as your toolkit for navigating fear. They are access the body, listen without attachment, reframe limiting stories, and reach out and create community.
Building blocks. Let's take the first one. Access the body. Why start with physical sensations?
Because fear often shows up physically before our rational mind even catches up. Those tight shoulders, that knot in your stomach, those are early signals.
Like a body alarm system.
Exactly. And by practicing mindfulness, learning to access the body, you get better at noticing these signals earlier before they overwhelm you. Plus, research shows mindfulness reduces stress and anxiety, which is pretty helpful when facing fear triggers.
So what are some common physical signs of fear we might notice?
Oh, it could be anything, really. A tight throat, maybe you can't concentrate, feeling irritable for no reason, sweaty palms, that churning gut feeling, or just freezing up like a deer in headlights. The key is learning your body's specific signals.
And the body scan exercise helps with that.
Yeah, the body scan is a classic mindfulness practice. You just gently bring your attention to different parts of your body, noticing whatever sensations are there without judging them.
Just noticing.
Just noticing. Doing it regularly makes you more sensitive to those first flickers of fear. And importantly, the book suggests putting a container around the practice if difficult emotions come up.
What does that mean, a container?
Like setting a time limit, maybe 5 minutes to start. Or deciding beforehand you'll call a friend afterwards or go for a walk. Something to make it feel safe and manageable, not overwhelming.
That's really practical. Makes it less scary to try. And Janelle's story fits here. The one who snapped at her kids.
Right. Janelle realized her snapping often came after ignoring physical tension building up all day, a sign of her suppressed martyr feelings. Tuning into her body helped her see the root cause, the feelings underneath, not just the surface behavior she disliked. It gave her insight.
Okay, that makes sense. Habit number 2, listen without attachment. This sounds like dealing with the inner critic.
That's exactly it. We all have that voice, right? The one telling us we're not good enough, we'll fail, etc. This step is about consciously listening to what it says.
Listening to it, not fighting it.
Right, listening, but, and this is crucial, without attachment, without getting sucked into its drama or believing everything it says.
How do you do that?
The book compares it to overhearing some negative stranger on the street. You hear the words, maybe, but you don't have to take them personally or let them ruin your day. You don't internalize them. Trying to argue with the critic or please it or shut it up completely usually doesn't work long term.
So acknowledge it's there, but don't give it the steering wheel.
Precisely. And there's an exercise, investigating the critic, where you actually write down its common criticisms about you, your limits, your main goals.
Writing it down, why?
It helps externalize it. You see the words on the page and it feels a bit more separate from you. You can see the patterns, often linked to your main fear routine. And understanding the critic's messed up motivation, usually misguided protection from pain or rejection, can also create distance.
And the redo please tool, how does that work?
That's a great little interruption technique. When you catch the critic starting its negative track, you literally say to yourself, mentally or even out loud, redo please. And then you consciously offer a more compassionate, constructive thought.
Like hitting pause and rewriting the script.
Exactly. You're actively retraining your internal dialogue.
Okay, on to the third habit. Reframe limiting stories. What are stories here?
Stories are basically our internal narratives, the assumptions we make about ourselves, life, what's possible. The key insight is that these stories act like filters, shaping how we see everything, even if they aren't objectively true.
So reframing isn't just positive thinking.
No, it's deeper than just affirmations you don't really believe. It's about actively questioning your assumptions, digging into why you believe a certain limiting story, and choosing a more expansive yet still believable narrative.
The author's own story about not being an athlete is a good example.
Perfect example. She held this story, I'm not an athlete. But then she questioned it. Is athleticism fixed or something you develop? By challenging and reframing that core belief, she opened the door to training for and completing triathlons. It shows how questioning assumptions unlocks potential.
Wow. And Carolyn's story about sabotage and commitment?
Yeah. Carolyn, the saboteur, realized she had this story that commitment means settling and missing out. That story was driving her avoidance. Recognizing it allowed her to question it and reframe it. Maybe something like commitment allows focus and deeper joy. That shift opened her up to considering a stable job differently.
So first, you have to spot the stories. The book has prompts.
Yep. Exercises to help you surface them, like finishing sentences. I feel like I can't. When it comes to my goal, I never seem to. To change my life, I don't know how to. Things like that.
And once you have a story,
You question it hard. Ask yourself, what am I making this mean? Is this really 100% true? Where did this belief come from? Get critical with it.
and then the reframing part, how do you actually do that?
It's iterative. Take the limiting sentence, like Janelle's, a good mother is self-sacrificing. Question it. Then stretch it gently in a more positive, empowering direction that still feels authentic to you. Maybe it becomes, a good mother balances her family's needs with her own. You adjust and tweak until you land on a reframe you can genuinely embrace. It's not about overnight transformation, but gradual shifting.
Okay, that makes sense. Gradual stretching. Finally, the fourth habit. Reach out and create community. Why is connection so key for courage?
Because going it alone is hard. A supportive community reinforces your efforts, helps you navigate setbacks, offers perspective, and just makes the whole journey feel less isolating and more possible.
Like having cheerleaders and coaches.
Kind of, yeah. Swoboda mentions how McCabe's support helped her reframe a failed course launch as a learning step. That kind of support is invaluable. It helps you keep going when things get tough.
So what makes a community courageous? What qualities should we look for?
The book highlights things like vulnerability, compassion, optimism, kindness, empathy. Crucially, people who offer empathy understanding rather than just jumping in with advice. The exercise is to think about who in your current life already embodies some of these qualities.
And the book talks about hiding out too.
Yeah.
Being afraid to be fully seen.
Yes. Acknowledging that past hurts or fear of judgment can make us hold back in relationships, even supportive ones. We don't let our most courageous self fully show up.
That sounds familiar.
Very relatable. So the book suggests applying the first three habits: body awareness, listening without attachment, reframing stories specifically to your relationships. Notice the physical sensations when you think about being vulnerable. Listen to the critics' stories about rejection. Reframe beliefs like, I'll be a burden if I ask for help.
So use the tools to overcome the fear of connection itself.
Exactly. Identify the limiting stories you have about reaching out, question them, reframe them, then practice. Practice being a bit more vulnerable, expressing optimism, offering empathy with those safe, supportive people you identified.
What about people who aren't supportive?
The book offers practical advice there too. Setting boundaries, maybe limiting contact, clearly requesting more respectful communication if needed. It's about protecting your energy while you build these new habits. Janelle's story about talking differently with her husband and son shows how this can play out in families.
It really sounds like these 4 habits are interconnected, building on each other.
They absolutely are. They create a kind of positive feedback loop for building courage.
And the book wraps up emphasizing reflection, looking
Yeah,
back.
yeah, taking time to reflect is key. Acknowledge how far you've come, notice the small shifts, reinforce those new neural pathways. It reminds you that the courage habit is a way of being, not just a destination.
Not finish line.
Right. Fear and doubt will still pop up. That's normal. But now you have tools to navigate them. The reflection helps solidify that.
And then it encourages setting new primary focus goals.
Yep. Identify maybe 3 key areas where you want to intentionally apply these courage habits moving forward. And it points you towards resources like a Courageous Living Planner and an online community for ongoing support.
Keep the momentum going.
Exactly. Take what you've learned and apply it consciously, knowing you've got this framework, this toolkit, and you're not alone.
So this deep dive into the courage habit really offers a practical step-by-step approach. It's not magic, it's practice.
Absolutely. Understanding your patterns, learning new responses, building support. It's about intentionally choosing courage, even when fear's whispering in your ear.
Not eliminating fear, but changing your relationship with it.
That's a great way to put it. And for you, our learner, wanting those actionable takeaways, this book seems packed with them. Lots to explore further.
Okay, here's a final thought to leave you with. What's one small, manageable step you could take, maybe even today, using just one of these courage habit principles? One tiny move towards living more like your most courageous self.
Because remember, those small, consistent shifts, they really do add up over time. They can lead to significant change.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.